Hello, I'm Terry Georgiou from the London Psychology Collective. Today we have with us Dr. Patricia Bonnici, and we'll be speaking about Jean-Paul Sartre's view on love and how this can apply to our everyday lives. Welcome, Patricia.
Hello, Terry.
So we've spoken about Sartre in a previous video and covered bad faith and freedom. Could you tell us a bit about Sartre's views on love?
Sure. So these start by building on bad faith. So if you remember, bad faith meant we try to make ourselves into objects, Sartre believing that consciousness is pure freedom or pure nothingness is kind of interchangeable, and we find this very anxiety provoking. Therefore we try to make ourselves into something like the waiter tries to make himself into a waiter. And Sartre continues to develop this idea to love, and he says that the problem with love is that it often leads to bad faith, or it's often carried out in bad faith. He starts off by saying that when I like somebody and I want them to love me, I try to make myself into the object of their desire. So I somehow try to figure out what the other person wants, what they find attractive, and I try to show them or prove to them that I'm exactly this sort of person that they want. So in this sense, I'm voluntarily giving up my freedom and making myself into an object and trying to seduce you into loving me. And he would say, that this is sort of the first part of bad faith. If it succeeds and the other person does then love me, it would also be bad faith in the sense that, well, does he really love the freedom that is me, or does he love the object that is me? And there starts all these sort of dynamics of object, subject, and objectifying people, dominating people, and he has this very sort of complex and negative view of relationships where it's all about us trying to possess each other and trying to control and dominate each other in many different ways.
So why would we want to do that? Why would we want to dominate the other?
Well, Sartre has quite a paradoxical understanding of it, which he talks about in the terms of the paradox. So he says that the reason I want to control somebody is that I'm very afraid of losing them. So if I'm in love, I'm very invested in a relationship, and I quite obviously don't want to lose the object of my love and the object of my desire. So I want to try to control them to guarantee that they're going to stay. However, at the same time, I very much desire that they freely love me, so that they've freely chosen to be with me, they've freely chosen to love me. And this sort of, keeps coming back and forth, that I want you to be free, but I don't want you to be so free that you can wander off and not love me anymore, that you can be unfaithful, that you can leave. And we constantly have to try to exist in that tension within this sort of bad fate, or else what Sartre also refers to as inauthentic love. So this is very much his definition of inauthentic love.
So that we would want the other person to stay with us and trying to control that, trying to secure, in a sense, the relationship so that they stay with us. But then you're saying there's something about the problem with that being that if we control them too much, then they've got no freedom.
Yeah.
And what we really want is for them to love us by choice.
Yes.
Not through control.
Yes, so he kind of keeps separating this into subject and object. So we realize that other human beings like us are subjects, that they can stop, they can reflect on themselves, they're self-aware essentially is his definition of subject. And this all comes from the idea that they are nothing, that they are consciousness which are full of nothing, and that we therefore choose objects in the world to fill our consciousness with. So we're quite aware of that, and we want to be loved by a subject because it is only a subject that is free. And we want to feel that they want us, essentially. And again, for someone to want us, they have to be free, because if they don't have any freedom, then it doesn't really matter. But yeah, this brings about so much anxiety, and I think you can see this quite a lot in normal, everyday relationships, that we start wondering about what is our partner doing when they're away on a business trip, or what do they do when they go out with their friends at the pub. So we both want them to be free, and we want them to be able to go out and do the sports that they love, or meet the people who they have other relations with, or their work friends, or old friends. But at the same time, we have this constant nagging anxiety about, but what is going to happen, because this subject is free and they can choose right now not to love me anymore. They can choose to have sex with somebody else, and how is that going to impact the love relationship?
So there's a kind of insecurity in any relationship, is what he's kind of saying, right?
Yes.
That it's kind of the nature of a relationship to not be totally secure, even if people are trying to secure their position or the other to stay with them. Actually, in essence, relationships are never fully secure. There's always freedom.
Yes.
And therefore there's always an anxiety of some kind.
Yes.
For each person.
Yeah, and I think that this is his view of love, both in his early work and his later work, that there's always this freedom embedded in relationship, or that there needs to be, unless we're really in a complete bad fate where we've really made objects of each other and where the person really has no choices or no options. And in the early work, kind of like being a nothingness, being his main early work, relationships always therefore seem very, very negative. So it's always about possession, it's always about control. He talks, he has phrases like sadomasochistic, domination, submission. It kind of brings a lot of Hegel's ideas around slave-master sort of relationships, and the two lovers constantly striving in the relationship to dominate the other, to control the other. And this is the period when he writes, for example, his play No Exit, where he has the very famous phrase, hell is other people, because he constantly realizes that we're at the mercy of the other person. And this is very much his idea of relationships in general, not only of love relationships, that he has the vignette in being in nothingness of someone peeping through the keyhole and being seen and experiencing shame. And he talks about how we're constantly aware that other people are passing judgment on us, that people have opinions about us, and that we constantly try to control the opinion of another person. So it's not only love relationships, which are very difficult for Sartre, it's just being in society, because we can never control what other people think of me, and that people might tell me what they think of me, but there's always that sense again of insecurity of, is it true? Are they really telling me the truth, or are they just telling me what I want to hear? And yet they have very different judgments. So we're always very aware of the gaze of the other, the look of the other, passing judgment on me, making me into an object, denying me of my subjectivity, and therefore in retaliation I do this to the other person before they can do it to me, so I turn you into an object. And this kind of always has therefore very conflictual relationships, and Sartre has been very criticised on his views of relationships and how kind of difficult he makes it, how impossible almost he makes it to have a relationship. And the question has been raised, well, what about his own life? And he managed to maintain a couple of relationships really for a very long time. The main one with Simone de Beauvoir, and so is this his understanding of relationships? Why did he maintain these relationships for such a long time?
Well, I'd like to return to his relationship with Simone de Beauvoir, but first I wanted to just pick up on that point, because for people to understand, I suppose, very common real world, everyday problem would be something like jealousy, right? A manifestation of what you're talking about would be that if people feel jealous in a romantic relationship, then that's an illustration of these concepts. Wanting to control another person, seeing the relationship a bit like a battle, because it's about securing yourself and making the other stay with you, not necessarily because you're what they want, but because you've demanded that they stay with you. So it's another way, I suppose, of keeping someone in the relationship. And as you said, it involves, I suppose, possessiveness, and seeing the other, in a sense, as an object. Is that right?
Yeah, an object which I can control, and I guess that is the definition of jealousy, isn't it? I don't want someone else to take something away from me, as if the other person is an object that doesn't really have a choice. The other person can be taken away or seduced by another person, and therefore I have to control this object and make sure who they speak to, where they go, that I'm always there, that they always check in with me. While if we saw the other as a freedom, we would know that really this is never going to work, that we might control up to a certain degree, but the other person will essentially remain free, and they will always essentially have the ability to choose somebody else.
Right. And so Sartre would say that jealousy as a way of maintaining the relationship is flawed in a sense. This is what we were saying, that if I control the other person or make sure that they have no avenue to stray, then okay, on the one hand they'll stay with me, but on the other hand there's something unsatisfying about it.
Yeah.
Because I don't want them to stay with me purely because I restricted their freedom. Maybe they secretly want to leave the relationship. So the person really wants them to stay through their own voluntary choice that they want to stay in the relationship.
And yet we're not really giving them the voluntary choice, because we're controlling their actions so much that they don't really have a voluntary choice anymore, and this leaves us feeling very unsatisfied. And jealousy, I think, is often combined with other feelings, either of sadness or depression or anger or rage, because in a sense it makes us feel very impotent, that I want to control. I don't want to control because I want them to freely love. I realise that I can't control no matter how much I control. So it often becomes quite a complex emotion that people find very difficult to handle.
And so if we go back to Sartre's own relationship with Simone de Beauvoir, how do you think he applied these ideas in that relationship?
Well, I think for him, he eventually moves away from this definition of an authentic love, or else rather he sticks with it, saying that most love is of this sort, is of the inauthentic sort, which is all about controlling and defining the other person as an object. But I would wonder that I think he would say that his relationship with Simone de Beauvoir was on a different level. It's what he talks about in his much later work, Notebooks on Ethics, and a little bit in Critique of Dialectical Reasoning, where he starts talking about what he terms authentic love, and he kind of puts this within an idea of what he calls a conversion. So what he says is that we really have to come to terms with the fact that we are nothing, that we are freedom, that is what our consciousness is. We are not an object of any sort, and that all our attempts to become objects, to make ourselves into anything, whether that's an object of desire for someone else or an object for someone else to love, or a waiter, or whatever it is, we have to realize that this is always bound to fail. And within love, this would mean that it would lead to the end of love, to the loss of love. So no matter what sort of object I make myself into, this is bound to fail. And there is always the possibility of a loss of love. And we really have to come to the place where we accept this. And when we've accepted this, he said that we would experience despair, that this would be a very difficult thing to accept. But through despair, we can then strive for authenticity. And I think this is very much his relationship with Simone de Beauvoir, where it's no longer about controlling the other or possessing the other, but it becomes something very much more of, they are free, Simone is free, she can go and come, she can do whatever she likes, but whoever she likes. I can do whatever I like as well, and we can both freely choose to come together, which is, I think, very much the way he saw it, that they both had lovers, numerous lovers. They both had, their own lives, their own working, their own writing. They both did their own thing, yet they both constantly chose to support each other and to help each other develop their own works. And this was very much his definition of authentic love, that we each have our own projects, we each have what we'd like to achieve, we'd like to become, an idea of an ideal self, and the lover would be the person who helps me to achieve that. So the lover should really see what my project is and help me to get that project, even if it might be quite difficult for them, or even if that might mean the loss of love, but the authentic lover would be the one who wants you to achieve that regardless.
So we've got, going from, initially we were saying inauthentic love being a way of restricting others' freedom and our own in order to keep in a safe relationship. And then you're saying Sartre develops this by helping us become aware of our own freedom and the fact that we can lose love as well, that that's the nature of things. And then applies it to what he calls authentic love, you're saying. And interesting, I find their relationship interesting as an illustration of this. So an open relationship where each is very much free to go and come back, and they stay together through choice. But I think importantly you're saying not just an authentic relationship or authentic love isn't just the recognition of the freedoms we have, it's also almost encouraging the freedom of ourselves and the other.
Yeah, encouraging it in so much of not only in words but actually helping each other. And again, I think within their own relationship, you could see this where both of them proofread, edit each other's work. So neither one of them ever published a book that the other person had not approved of. So Jean-Paul Sartre would write his book and Simone de Beauvoir would read it, she'd criticise it, she'd tell him, this needs to be changed, this isn't ready for publication yet. And he would listen to this, he would take the feedback on board, he would do it. And I think he would see that very much within this idea of authentic love, that they both realised that their writing, their philosophy was a very important part of the other person, and that they needed to express that, they needed to give that, and they would help each other to give that, and that these sort of petty jealousies wouldn't come in the way. And Simone de Beauvoir has often kind of said that she might have been jealous of previous lovers or current lovers Sartre had at the same time, but yet these never got in the way of her, kind of doing a good job on editing his work and helping him to publish this work, because that again would be his definition of true love, authentic love, and really he would call it an accomplishment. So he wouldn't think that love was something easy to achieve, because even within two people have experienced the conversion, even within this idea of authentic love, he was always quite aware of the danger of slipping back into an authentic love, and how easy this is, that really this is what we want. We want to be objects. It's the nature of human consciousness to want to become an object. It's the nature of love relationships to want to make objects of each other. So it's a constant struggle to maintain the freedom both of ourselves and not becoming an object for the other, but also to give the other the freedom that they are.
So you're saying, so once you've gone through the conversion, as you say, moving to a more authentic type of love, that's not necessarily maintained always. It's not just an end point and we're there. That, I suppose, as with many things, where there's still work involved in maintaining, or we can slip back into jealousy, or slip back into restricting another's freedom, or whatever it might be. And then it's, I suppose, working on it once again to get back to that.
So I think he's really quite aware that love is very difficult, and I think this is what we are all very aware of, that first we all want a relationship, or lots of us want relationships, and we work very hard to attract someone, to start a relationship, and it might maybe start off relatively easy with lots of attraction and lots of lust and lots of interest in each other. But then what happens once the relationship becomes quite established, and what do we do with all the other feelings then, and how do we enable each other to grow within that relationship, which for Sartre was very important, the growth within the relationship. And he saw this very much as this was the project that each person had, and that if we are going to share authentic love, then we also need to share projects, not in the sense that we have to have a mutual or a common project, but that we have to help each other with our own projects, to help each other develop, to help each other grow.
And I suppose in their relationship there was a kind of respect as well for one another, and like a partnership in working together on each person's project. So as you say, maybe not always working on the same project, but being aware that the other person has a project, meaning that there's some way in which they want to grow, and being interested in that, helping that. I suppose in modern relationships, there can be different phases, can't there? So people can be together for a time, and then one person wants to grow in a way that maybe the other person finds challenging or threatening. And so it's perhaps, keeping that in mind, Sartre's idea that, well, it's hard work, but ultimately...
I think that's the real challenge, isn't it, of authentic love, because I think at that point it's very easy to think, well, if you get that job in a different country, then what's going to happen to us? Does that mean I'm going to have to move with you? I don't want to move. Does that mean that you're going to leave me behind and you're just going to move on to this new life that you want? And I think it's a very difficult choice, because what do we do? Do we just kind of go, well, I really love you and I'm going to help you achieve this dream because that's authentic love and that's acknowledging your freedom as a free subject, I'm going to help you fulfill that. But what about me? So I think there is a lot of challenge around that, and it's a very difficult place, and you can see why in some senses, whether it's authentic or inauthentic or healthy or unhealthy, it's so easy to fall into the place of jealously guarding what we feel is ours, that, well, this is mine, and I'm not just going to give you up without a fight, because that will lead to despair and loss.
And I suppose with Sartre's work, he hasn't fully, described every aspect of how this authentic love should be, but that he's given enough clues, I suppose, as to what we can work on.
Yeah.
I suppose it's food for thought in modern relationships to notice all the dynamics that keep changing, that there isn't one state that we can reach and then everything's blissful from then on.
Yeah, and it is very common, I think, even within sort of open relationships, again, looking at Sartre's life, it wasn't that easy, and all these sort of different women were vying for his attention and were kind of competing against each other, and a lot of the women didn't particularly like each other, and he kind of, is jokingly on record saying that he lies to all of them, and he doesn't really tell them what he's doing, because it's just too difficult keeping up with all these people. And I think, even in Simone's life, she talks about difficult relationships where other men who, truly, whatever that might mean, loved her, had a lot of problems with what do you mean Sartre is always going to be sort of part of this? Well, I don't want him to be part of this. Why can't it just be me and you in this? And I think, in nowadays, open relationships and, polyamorous couples and all this sort of thing is becoming, again, quite popular. But how do people manage to maintain these relationships? And it's not as easy as saying, well, okay, this is the primary relationship, or, this is the relationship, and then we just have sex with other people. But a lot of negotiating has to go on, because it is easy to fall into the position of being jealous and possessive, and it has to really be thought about.
Yeah. And I suppose at the risk of suggesting that everyone should have open relationships, I suppose there's something perhaps universal there about healthy relationships, and we've been speaking mainly about romantic relationships, but I suppose it applies to other types of relationships too, friendships and working relationships, that, the general kind of existential concepts there of freedom and, kind of knowing ourselves, I suppose, apply here, don't they? Yeah,
I think Sartre was talking very much about, very broad relationships, not even personal relationships in society, of as I do something, how is someone going to judge me? If I'm exercising in the gym, what do the other gym goers think of me? Are they thinking that, oh, you're too fat to be doing this? Are they thinking I'm attractive? Are they thinking I'm doing it wrong? So in this very, very broad sense of what do other people think of me, and therefore how do they control me, because they make me into something, they label me as something, and then I can't really break out of that, and even worse, I don't even really know what the label is. I have no idea what the passerby is thinking as they see me sitting on a bench. And of course then within friendships that also applies, that I think there's often a need to control friends and feeling, well, I don't want them to leave, or how's that going to affect my friendship if they start a relationship or if they move country. So I think we see that maybe to a lesser degree than intimate relationships, because maybe we depend less on friends in some ways, but then we can still see a lot of this objectifying of friends and controlling friends and trying to capture friends in that sense.
So I suppose, perhaps in summary then, this idea of authentic love is ultimately a way of freeing ourselves up. Okay, granted, it means we might have to handle the anxiety that comes with it, but that we can become freer and more authentic to ourselves.
With that we won't be living in bad faith, because we've acknowledged that I am free, that I am in nothingness, that I can change at any point in time, be whoever I want to be, and that the person that I'm with, whether that's in an intimate relationship or a friendship or a work colleague, is exactly the same. They're also a free subject, and they can also be completely different. So, relationships will constantly change, and that is part of the anxiety of relationship, and in some ways that's also part of their excitement, which is why we don't want to love an object, we don't want to love something which we can completely control, because then there's no real fun in the relationship.
Well, once again, thank you very much, Patricia.
You're welcome.